The ASP.NET framework was founded by Microsoft and introduced to programming world in January of 2002. It is used by numerous custom software development companies globally. Still regarded as one of the go-to frameworks for the purpose of web development, ASP.NET is still widely regarded as one of the most prominent languages in the web development space. According to a report, around 12,902 companies reportedly use ASP.NET in their tech stacks including Slack, Alibaba Travels, and Roblox. With around $103,000 as average salary for mid-level professionals in this field, learning ASP.NET can be the right career choice for you. With that being said, hello everyone and welcome to Simplilearn's YouTube channel where we talk about everything about technology, upskilling and innovation. Make sure to subscribe to our channel and hit that bell icon to never miss an update from us. So without any further ado, let's quickly jump onto the agenda for this session. We will start by knowing the basics of ASP.NET and difference between .NET and Java. Understanding ASP.NET lifecycles, MVC, ASP.NET architecture. By the end of this video, we'll cover a few projects on ASP.NET followed by interview questions. So without any further ado, let's begin. Over to our tutors.
Java is a programming language and computing platform. There are lots of applications and websites that will not work unless you have Java installed in it. Java was first released by Sun Microsystems in 1995, and the Oracle Corporation later acquired it. Java software platform runs on the billions of devices, including notebook computers, mobiles, devices, gaming consoles, medical devices, and many others. Java is widely used object-oriented programming language. The rules and syntax of Java are based on the C and C++ languages. Java is fast, secure, and reliable. From laptops to data centers, game consoles to scientific supercomputers, cell phones to the internet, Java is everywhere. Java is a multi-platform, object-oriented, and network-centric language. It is among the most used programming language. Now let us understand what is .NET. .NET is a free, cross-platform, open-source developer framework for building many different types of applications. .NET Core is a cross-platform that supports Windows, Linux, and Mac OS. Microsoft began developing .NET framework in the late 1990s. By early 2000, the first beta version of .NET 1.0 were released. With .NET, you can use multiple languages, editors, libraries to build web, mobile, desktop, games, and IoT applications. We can write .NET apps in C#, F#, or Visual Basic. Whether you're working in C#, F#, or Visual Basic, the code will run natively on any compatible OS. .NET Standard is a base set of APIs that are common to all .NET implementations. NuGet is a package manager built specifically for .NET that contains over 90,000 packages. Now let us look at the comparison between Java and .NET. The first parameter is the fundamentals. Java is a programming language and computing platform that was first released by Sun Microsystems in 1995. Java is widely used object-oriented programming language and software platform that runs on billions of devices, including computers, mobiles, medical devices, and many others. Whereas .NET Framework is free, cross-platform, open-source framework for building different applications. By early 2000, the first beta version of .NET 1.0 was released. The next parameter is languages. Java itself is a programming language. However, Java Virtual Machine supports other programming languages like Python, R, and Ruby. With .NET, we can use multiple languages. We can write .NET apps in C#, F#, and Visual Basic. Operating system. Java can work on different operating systems like Microsoft Windows, the Solaris operating system, Linux, or Mac OS. Whereas .NET works only on Windows operating system, that is Windows 98 or later, Windows NT 4.0 or later. integrated development environment. Java uses IDEs like Eclipse, BlueJ, IntelliJ IDEA, JGrasp, JCreator, NetBeans, Greenfoot, and JDevelop. And in .NET, IDEs like Atom, Bracket, Sublime Text, ECMAS, and Vim are used, but the most common one is Visual Studio.
If getting your learning started is half the battle, what if you could do that for free? Visit SkillUp by Simplilearn. Click on the link in the description to know more.
The next parameter is libraries. The Java class library is a set of dynamically loaded libraries that Java virtual machine languages can call at runtime. A Java library is just a collection of classes that have been written by somebody else. Some of the libraries used in Java are Apache Commons, Google Guava, and Jackson. Whereas in .NET Framework, class library is the collection of classes, namespaces, interfaces, and value types that are used for .NET applications. Class libraries are shared library concept for .NET. Some of the .NET libraries are Swashbuckle, Poly, AutoMapper, and SassKit. Performance. Java's efficiency is from just-in-time compiler and concurrency capabilities. The just-in-time compiler is a part of the Java runtime environment. The compiled code is immediately called by Java Virtual Machine. Compiling does not require processing time or memory use because the code is not interpreted. As a result, Java program is as quick as native application. Whereas in .NET uses natively compiled languages like C# and C++. They are faster and less memory consuming than Java. .NET also enables optimizing the code and writing less code, which increases the performance. The shorter the code also means less effort spent on the code maintenance and easier debugging. Versions. In Java, the first beta version was released in 1995, following which the version 1.0 was released in Jan 1996 and so on. The most recent versions was Java SE16 released in March 2021, and 5 months later Java SE17 was released on September 2021, and it's likely that on March 2022 Java SE18 will be released. In .NET, the first version 1.0 was released on 15 Jan 2002, and the most recent version released is version 4.8 on 18th April 2019. Now let us look at the licensing of Java and .NET. Since the Java 8 update on April 16, 2019, all versions and update for Java above 8 has no cost for personal use and development purposes, but any other use needs a commercial license. Whereas in .NET is free open source developer platform with no licensing cost and free development tools for Linux, Mac OS and Windows. There are no licensing costs including commercial use. Lastly, we will look at jobs and salaries. There are over 316,715 Java developers currently employed in United States. Whereas in .NET there are over 254,189 .NET developers currently employed in United States. The average salary for a Java developer in India is 4,61,000, whereas the average salary for a .NET developer in India is 4,14,000. The average salary for Java developer in United States is $76,000, whereas the average salary for a .NET developer in United States is $72,000. Now let us see when to use Java and .NET. Java is suitable for web projects, big data, and GUI applications. Java is used as server-side language for back-end development. Java is also used for embedded systems, Android applications, and web applications. Because Java is portable, you may choose which operating system you want to work on. This adaptability allows to select tools without having to worry about compatibility difficulties. .NET is used to build for web, mobile, desktop, games, and IoT. .NET is also used for web applications, client applications, and enterprise development. .NET has taken over for web services and APIs. It is mostly preferred for Windows API service.
Let's first see why do we use ASP.NET. Many questions arise in our mind while building an application. All we think about is speed, cost, and language. But with respect to building a web application, ASP.NET is much easier as compared to other technologies like PHP and Node.js. It is much faster and much more efficient than many other languages. ASP.NET also allows you to build many types of applications like REST APIs and web pages. ASP.NET takes comparatively less time to execute, and the execution takes place only once. Now, when you have an idea about why we use ASP.NET, let us understand what exactly ASP.NET is all about. ASP.NET is a server-side technology used for developing dynamic web applications. ASP.NET was developed by Microsoft and it is mainly used to build websites and web applications. ASP.NET is the latest version of Active Server Pages which Microsoft developed to build websites. It was released in 2002 and had an extension of .ASPX. Active Server Pages is a server-side scripting language and engine used for developing web applications. ASP.NET produces interactive data-driven web applications on the internet. Now, when we know what is ASP.NET, let's have a look at the architecture and components of ASP.NET. First, let's have a look at the architecture and then we shall focus on the components. ASP.NET architecture helps in increasing performance, scalability, and flexibility. First, ASP.NET requests an HTML file from the server. Then, Internet Information Services or IIS passes that information to the ASP.NET engine. And after that, ASP.NET engine reads the file and executes the script. IIS or Internet Information Services is an extensible web server used to host ASP.NET web applications. After that, ASP.NET returns the file to the browser as an HTML file. Now, when we know the architecture of ASP.NET, it is time to move on to the components of ASP.NET. ASP.NET architecture depends on three different components. The three components are language, library, and common language runtime. Let's have a look at these three components in detail. The first component we have is language. When we build an application, we need to code the application so that we can communicate with the computer. There are many computer languages that help to communicate with computers to develop web applications. Some of them are VB.NET and C#, which are typically used to build applications in ASP.NET. The second component we have is the library. Library is a pre-written class or a coded template that a developer can use while developing an application. The most common library used for ASP.NET web applications is the web library. Web library is a part of a website that offers a stock of websites when users browse. The third and the last component we have is the Common Language Runtime. Common Language Runtime is a platform used to execute the programs. It is also used for performing key activities like garbage collection. Moving forth, let's understand some basic skills that are required to master ASP.NET. Some of the basic skills that are required to understand ASP.NET are: first, you should have some basic knowledge of C#, JavaScript, and HTML. Then, you should have some knowledge about ASP.NET MVC. Along with this, we must have good knowledge of object-oriented programming concepts and some experience in web development. Moving forth, let's understand the tools and frameworks used for ASP.NET. The first tool we have is the Microsoft Web Platform Installer. Microsoft Web Platform Installer is a free tool that can help run web applications and get the latest SQL Server Express. The second tool we have is SQL Complete. SQL Complete is a customizable tool that improves the quality of the code and simplifies the creation of SQL queries with context-based code completion. Moving forth, the next tool is Web Essentials for Visual Studio. Web Essentials for Visual Studio is a tool that opens up the inventory of CSS, HTML, JavaScript, and TypeScript. The fourth tool on our list is the Resharper. Resharper is the tool that provides an absolute productivity boost in code quality analysis and reduces time by identifying errors, which makes developers build applications quickly. Now, when we know about the tools and frameworks of ASP.NET, let's have a look at some of the benefits of using ASP.NET. First, the applications developed using ASP.NET perform better than the applications developed using other technologies like PHP and Node.js. Then, ASP.NET provides more security to the application so that you can easily develop secure applications through the built-in Windows authentication and pre-application configuration features. ASP.NET also provides multiple development modes for the applications so that the applications are easy for configuration and deployment. One of the best features of ASP.NET is its language independent feature, which means we can use any language that we are comfortable with. Hence, the applications built using ASP.NET can be used across the globe. ASP.NET is a server-side technology used for developing dynamic web applications. It is the latest version of the Active Server Pages. Active Server Pages is a server-side scripting language and engine used for developing web applications. It is essentially a web-based platform that helps to create dynamic web pages for programmers. ASP.NET produces interactive, data-driven web applications on the internet. It works on HTTP protocols and uses HTTP commands to set communication between the server and the browser. The codes can be written in many different languages like C#, Visual Studio, and JavaScript. The latest version of ASP.NET is the Active Server Pages, which Microsoft developed to build websites. It was released in 2002 and had an extension of .ASPX. ASP.NET consists of a large number of controls such as text boxes, buttons, and labels for assembling. It produces interactive, data-driven web applications on the internet, which helps to build websites and web applications in a better and colorful way. Now when we know what is ASP.NET, let's have a look at the architecture of ASP.NET. ASP.NET architecture consists of three different components. The first component is language, then comes library, and finally comes the common language runtime. Moving forward, we shall learn about these three components one after the another. The first component we have is language. Whenever we build an application, the first task is to communicate with the application, which is made possible by different programming languages. The three major languages that ASP.NET uses to communicate with a computer are C#, VB.NET, and F#. The second component is the library. Library is a pre-written class or a coded template that a developer can use while developing an application. The most common library used for ASP.NET web applications is the web library. Web library is a part of a website that offers a collection of websites when users browse. It possesses all the properties that help in building a web application. The third and last integral component is the Common Language Runtime. Common Language Runtime is a platform used to execute the programs. Common Language Runtime mainly helps to execute .NET programs, and it is also used for performing key activities like garbage collection and exception handling. The code that the Common Language Runtime directly manages is called the managed code. Now, when we know about the architecture and its components, let's have a look at some of the characteristics of ASP.NET. Here, we shall see 5 characteristics of ASP.NET, beginning with code behind model, then we have directives, followed by caching, and after caching, we have user controls and state management. Let's have a look at all these characteristics one by one. Beginning with the code behind model characteristic. Code behind model helps in dealing with dynamic programming code. It also helps to place code in a separate designated script or a specific file named as mypage.aspx.cs, while the main page file is mypage.aspx. Code behind model also helps to create applications with different content. The second characteristic is directives. Directives act like a support to the pages. It gives support by providing special instructions to the developer on how a page should be processed. Directives also specify and enable the attribute to show how an application should be used. Then comes the third characteristic, and that is caching. Caching helps in improving the performance of an application, which helps a user to use an application more efficiently. It also helps to store page requests of the user in a temporary location. The fourth characteristic is user controls. The sections of pages that are registered and used as controls are called as the user controls. User controls also create markup files that contain static HTML markup and server-side web controls. The fifth and final characteristic is the state management characteristic. ASP.NET provides state management which helps to store the state of every user. By providing the state of every user, it becomes easy to use ASP.NET applications. ASP.NET Lifecycle is very crucial when it comes to developing applications. The lifecycle includes 2 different stages that help in producing dynamic outputs. These 2 stages together are known as the ASP.NET Lifecycle. The 2 stages in which the lifecycle is divided are Application Lifecycle and the Page Lifecycle. Now, we shall have a look at both of these types in detail. First, let's have a look at the Application Lifecycle. Application Lifecycle is the part that starts when the user makes a request. These requests involve several stages, and these stages are application start, object creation, HTTP application, dispose, and application end. Let's have a look at each of these steps in detail. The first step we have is application start. Whenever a user requests an application for accessing a web server, first the request is checked and then the request for accessing it is provided. The second stage we have is the object creation. Object creation helps in holding all the information about the request, cookies, and browsing information. It also holds HTTP context, HTTP request, and HTTP response by the browser. The third stage is the HTTP application. HTTP application holds back all the subsequent information sent back to the user by the WebDriver. For example, if we have 2 different applications, like one is a gaming application and the other one is a social media application. Then that means there will be two HTTP applications that are to be created to process the application. The fourth stage is dispose. Dispose helps in erasing the unmanaged resources when the objects are no longer needed. Moving forth, the last and the final stage is the application end. Application end helps to unload the memory of an application. Here, unloading memory means cleaning up the unwanted files in the application. Now when we know about the application lifecycle, let's have a look at the page lifecycle. Page lifecycle includes initialization, restoring, and execution. When an ASP.NET page is called, it goes through some phases before the response is sent to the user. Let's have a look at the phases involved in the page lifecycle. Beginning with page request, then comes page start, page initialization, page load, validation, event handling, rendering, and unload. Let's have a look at all these steps in detail. The first phase of the page lifecycle is page request. When the user requests a page, the server checks the request, compiles the page, and responds to the user. If the page is requested several times, then the cache will check the request to see if the output exists or not. And after that, it will send a response back to the user. The second phase is page start. Page start holds two objects, request and response. The request holds all the information which was sent when the page was requested, and the response holds all the information sent back to the user. The third phase is the page initialization phase. During the page initialization phase, all controls are initialized and each controller is provided with a specific ID. In the page initialization phase, themes are also applied to the applications. The fourth phase is page load. In this phase, the application is provided with some control properties, and the information is also set using view state and control state. The fifth phase of the page lifecycle is validation. When a page is executed, the result of those pages are provided in the form of two conditions, true and false. If the execution goes successful, the result is true, while if there is an error in execution, it returns false. The sixth phase in the lifecycle is event handling. This phase is the response to the validation phase. In this phase, pages are loaded again and display the same information. In order to overcome this, a postback event is called. This event helps in checking the credentials of the user. The seventh phase of the lifecycle is rendering. It occurs when all the response information has been sent back to the user. The phase also stores all the information that is being sent. The eighth and the final stage of the page lifecycle is unload. Unload helps to clean all the unwanted information of an application. It also cleans the memory once the output is sent back to the user.
What is a navigation bar in ASP.NET? Navigation bar in ASP.NET is used to create a navigation header for a website or a web application. It makes it simple for an application to browse. ASP.NET has three navigation controls: dynamic menus, tree views, and sitemap path. Dynamic menu displays the standard site navigation menu, whereas tree views displays a multi-level navigation menu, and sitemap path displays a trail to the current page and link to the previous page. Now let us look at a demo on how to create a navigation bar. So we have opened Visual Studio 2019. Go to File, New, create a new project. We'll select ASP.NET Core Web App Model View Controller template. Scroll down. So select this template, click on Next. Provide the project name. Since we are creating a navigation bar, so we'll provide the project name as navbar. Click on Next. And if you want to change the target framework, you can change it here. I'll keep the default one. Click on Create. So here you can see the project is successfully created. Let's click on View and open Solution Explorer. So now let us run this and see what is the output. Here you can see the build has started. Here you can see it is running on localhost, and this is the default nav bar which is created. So what we'll do is we'll go and change this navigation bar. So go back to Visual Studio. Go to Solution Explorer. Go to Views. Go to layout.cs HTML. Open this file, and here you can see if you look inside the header, this is the navbar. So what we'll do is we'll delete this navbar. So this is the small code which I have pasted here. So I have created a class navbar and provided the background color as dark, and I haven't provided any link as of now, and I have named it as Simplilearn. And similarly, I have created another class. In this class, I have created a drop down. In this drop down, I have named it as courses, articles, and others. So let us go and run this and see the output. So this is the navbar which we created. The Simplilearn, Home, About, and we created a drop down resources. In this drop down we have courses, articles, and others. Similarly, we have contact us, and we have this search bar. This is the navbar which we created. So we'll go back to the code. So here we have created another class navbar contact us, and this is where we created the search bar.
What is ASP.NET Core? ASP.NET Core is an open source, cross-platform, high-performance framework for developing modern, cloud-enabled internet-connected apps. ASP.NET Core is the open source version of ASP.NET that runs on Mac OS, Linux, and Windows. ASP.NET Core was first released in 2016 and is a redesign of earlier Windows-only versions of ASP.NET. Why use ASP.NET Core? ASP.NET is used by millions of developers to construct web applications. ASP.NET Core is a redesigned version of ASP.NET that includes architectural improvements to create a more modular framework. With ASP.NET Core, we can build web apps and services, IoT apps, and mobile backends. We can use development tools on Windows, Mac OS, and Linux. Using ASP.NET Core, we can deploy to the cloud or on-premises. We can run on .NET Core. Now let us look at the features of ASP.NET Core. ASP.NET Core provides a single framework for developing web UI and web APIs. ASP.NET Core is designed for testing. It provides Razor pages that make it easier and more productive to code page-focused situations. Blazor allows use of C# alongside JavaScript in the browser. Share server-side and client-side application logic built in .NET. ASP.NET Core has the capability to design and run applications on Windows, Mac OS, and Linux. It is community-driven and open source. It provides modern client-side frameworks and development methods that are integrated. ASP.NET is a configuration system that is cloud-ready and environment-based. It gives high-performance, lightweight, modular HTTP request pipeline and provides built-in dependency injection. ASP.NET Core has the capability to host on the following platforms, that is, Kestrel, IIS, HTTP, Nginx, and Apache Docker. Now let us look at the architecture of ASP.NET. The concept of ASP.NET fundamental architecture is similar to N-layer architecture that defines the layer as the core component of the platform, releasing the developer the burden of redefining it in order to make solution more flexible and reusable. The main business logic and UI logic in ASP.NET Core are encapsulated in the web app layer, while the database access layer, CAT services, and web API services are encapsulated in the infrastructure layer. Common utilities, objects, interfaces, and reusable business services are encapsulated as microservices in the application core project. The data sources could be SQL database, and the third-party services include GitHub API, SendGrid API, and others. Dotted arrow shows the compile time dependency, and the regular arrow indicates the runtime dependency. Application core project. The business model, which contains entities, services, and interfaces, is stored in the application core. These interfaces contains abstractions for operations done by infrastructure, such as database access, file system access, and network calls, and so on. Application core types include entities, interfaces, services, and DTOs. Infrastructure project. The infrastructure project includes data access implementations such as Entity Framework, EF Core migration objects, and data access implementation classes. The infrastructure project contains implementation of services that must interact with the infrastructure concerns. These services implement interfaces defined in the application core, and so infrastructure should have a reference to the application core project. Infrastructure types include EF Core types, data access implementation types, and infrastructure-specific services. Benefits of ASP.NET Core over ASP.NET Framework. Benefits of .NET Core over .NET Framework include: it provides cross-platform. It runs on Windows, Mac OS, and Linux. ASP.NET Core has improved performance. It provides side-by-side versioning. It provides new APIs, and it is open source. Now let us look at the industry trends of ASP.NET Core. This picture depicts the industry trends of ASP.NET and .NET Framework. ASP.NET Core is the most used framework, and it is growing in popularity as the majority of developers use it on regular basis. It is expected that ASP.NET will overtake .NET Framework in popularity in coming years.
If getting your learning started is half the battle, what if you could do that for free? Visit Scale-Up by Simplilearn. Click on the link in the description to know more.
So now let us look at the demo. So we'll first look at the prerequisites. First, we need to install the required software and set up the system for ASP.NET Core development. First, we need an editor, maybe Visual Studio, Sublime, Autumn or any other, but I would recommend to go with Visual Studio 2019. Next, we need .NET Core SDK Software Development Kit. So let's go to the browser and install this. So go to the visualstudio.microsoft.com and go to downloads. From here you can download Visual Studio 2019, the community edition. This is free community edition. Then to download .NET SDK, go to .NETmicrosoft.com. From here you can download .NET Core. From here you can download .NET Core 3.1. So click on this and get this downloaded. Once you have downloaded these files, open Visual Studio Code. Open Visual Studio 2019. So open Visual Studio 2019. When you open it for the first time, in the workloads under the toolset section, select .NET Core Cross-Platform. On the left hand side, it shows the recent project that you have worked on. And at the right hand side, we can create a new project. We can open a folder, open a project or a solution and clone a repository. So we'll click on Create New Project. So these are the different project templates present in Visual Studio 2019. We have ASP.NET Core Web App. This is used for creating core application, for example, Blazor Pages content. Then we have Blazor WebAssembly. Then we have ASP.NET Core Empty. In this template, we can create .NET Core application from the scratch. And we have ASP.NET Core Web App, Model View Controller. We'll discuss this in the upcoming videos. Similarly, we have Blazor Server App, ASP.NET Core Web API, and many more. You can scroll down and explore. We have many more. We have ASP.NET Core with Angular, with React.js. So for now, we will use ASP.NET Core Empty. So select this ASP.NET Core Empty and click on Next. And name the project. So we'll name the project as Demo Application. If you want to provide a different solution name, you can check this box and provide a different solution name. So click on Next. Select the target framework, .NET Core 3.1 or 5.0. I'll select it as 5.0 and click on Next. Click on Create. Okay, so here we go, the demo app project is created. These are the default folders that I've generated. We have dependencies folder, in which we have analyzers and frameworks. Then we have properties folder, in which we have launch setting.json file. Then we have app settings.json file, and we have program and startup file. So we'll run this and see. Click on run, and here you can see build started. Here we can see the localhost 44313. So it's showing hello world. So where is this hello world getting generated from? So we'll go back to Visual Studio. So go to Solution Explorer and go to startup.cs file. If you scroll down, you can see here, this is where hello world is getting generated from. So we'll change this, change the message and enter. So change the message and enter. Thanks for watching. Stay tuned to Simplilearn. So let me run this. here you see. So here you can see. Thanks for watching and stay tuned to Simplilearn.
What is MVC pattern? The Model View Controller MVC architectural pattern divides an application into three major component groups: model, view, and controller. The principle behind developing MVC is the separation of concerns. This principle implies that software should be classified based on the type of task it performs. Separation ensures that the business model is simple to test and can change without becoming too involved in low-level implementation details. Using this MVC pattern, user requests are routed to a controller, who is in charge of interacting with the model to conduct user actions and receive query results. The controller selects the view to be displayed to the user and supplies it with any model data it requires. What is ASP.NET Core MVC? The ASP.NET Core MVC framework is a lightweight, open source, and highly testable presentation framework designed specifically for use with ASP.NET Core. ASP.NET Core MVC is an application framework that allows you to create modern web apps by using the MVC Model View Controller architectural pattern. ASP.NET Core MVC provides a pattern-based approach to developing dynamic websites that allow for a clear separation of concerns. It allows you to complete markup control, facilitates TDD-friendly development, and corresponds to the most recent web standards. Functions of MVC. Let's look at the model functions, the responsibilities that a model carries. In an MVC application, the model represents the application's state and any other business logic or activities that should be executed by it. Business logic and any implementation logic for maintaining the application's state should be wrapped in the model. View model classes intend to contain the data to display on that view are often used in strong typed views. The model is used by the controller to construct and populate these view model instances. View responsibilities. Views are in charge of displaying content through the user interface. They embed .NET code in HTML markup using the Razor View engine. Views should have minimal logic, and any logic should be related to presenting content. Consider using a view component, view model, or view template to simplify the view if you need to perform a logic in view files to display data from a complex model. Now let us look at the functions of a controller. Controllers are the components that manage user input, interact with the model, and finally choose which view to render. The view just displays information in an MVC application. The controller processes and responds to the user input and interaction. The controller is the initial entry point in the MVC architecture, and it is responsible for deciding which model type to interact with and which view to represent. Hence its name is controller as it responds to a given request. Now let us look at the components of ASP.NET MVC. Some of the components of MVC are routing, model binding, model validation, dependency injection, filters, and areas. Now let us look at them one by one. At first we have routing. ASP.NET Core MVC is built on top of ASP.NET Core Routing, a robust URL mapping component that enables the creation of applications with logical and searchable URLs. This allows us to establish URL naming patterns for applications that perform well for search engine optimization and link generation, regardless of how the files on your web server are arranged. Routes can be defined with a simple route template syntax that takes into account route value limitations, defaults, and optional values. Next, we have model binding. Model binding in ASP.NET Core MVC transforms client requests such as form values, route data, query string parameters, and HTTP headers. It transforms this data into objects that the controller can handle. As a result, the controller logic does not have to do the job of determining the incoming request data. Instead, the data is passed as parameters to its action methods. Next, we have model validation. Validation is supported in ASP.NET Core MVC by decorating your model object with data annotation validation attributes. Before values are sent to the server, the validation attributes are checked on the client side. The framework validates request data on both the client and the server side. Dependency injection. ASP.NET Core includes dependency injection capabilities. Controllers in ASP.NET Core MVC can request required services through their constructors, allowing them to follow to the explicit dependencies principle. Dependency injection is a software design technique that achieves inversion of control between classes and their dependencies. Filters. Filters in ASP.NET Core enable code to be executed before or after particular stages of the request processing pipeline. Filters can be used as attributes on controllers or actions. Filters manage duties such as authorization, restricting unauthorized access to resources, and response catching. Filters allow for the execution of custom pre- and post-processing logic for action methods, and they may be set to run at certain points in the execution pipeline for given request. Last, we have areas. Areas allow you to divide a large ASP.NET Core MVC web app into smaller functional groups. An area is an MVC structure that exists between an application. Logical components such as model, controller, and view are kept in separate folders in an MVC project. An MVC uses naming conventions to build a relationship between these components. It may be good to partition a large app into different high-level functional regions. For example, consider an e-commerce app with numerous business units such as checkout, billing, and search among others. Each of these units has its own set of logical component views, controllers, and models.
Now let us look at the demo. In this demo, we will create our first ASP.NET Core MVC application. So first we need to install the required software and set up the system for ASP.NET Core MVC development. Firstly, we need .NET Core SDK, Software Development Kit. Then we need to install the SQL Server, and then we need to install editor like Visual Studio. Once you have installed the Visual Studio, click on Launch. Visual Studio 2019 is getting opened. So this is how the Visual Studio 2019 looks like. Towards the left hand side we have the recent applications which we have worked on, and towards the right side we have the options to clone a repository, to open a project or a solution, to open a local folder, or create a new project. So click on create a new project. Here we have different project templates. We have console application, which is used for creating a command line application that can run on .NET Core, Windows, Linux, and Mac OS. Similarly, we have other templates like ASP.NET Core Web App, Blazor WebAssembly App, and if you scroll down, you have many more templates. But for this project, we need the template ASP.NET Core Web App Model View Controller.
Since this video is related to MVC, we need this template. So select this template. This template basically is used for creating an ASP.NET Core application with ASP.NET Core MVC, model, view, and controller. So select this, click on next. Give the project name. So we'll enter it as say demo, since we are showing a demo. So we'll enter the project name demo. If you want the solution name to be different from the project name, then check this box and provide the solution name. So we'll keep it as it is. Click on next. Select the target framework, authentication type if required, then click on create. Here you go. The project is successfully created. So here you can see there are different types of files and folders. For this template, the addition of folders is the controller, model, and view. So these three folders are added for this particular template MVC. You can check out our previous video on ASP.NET Core tutorial wherein I have explained each of these folders in detail. Open views, and in shared you can see layout.cs.html. Open this file. So let's click on run and see what is the output. So click on run. Here you can see build started. Here you can see it is running on the local host server. So this is the project, this is the template. Let us go back to the Visual Studio and change this. So this is where you can change the title from demo. We'll change it to Simplilearn. Similarly, if you want to change the home or the privacy, you can change it here. This is where you modify all the setup. So we'll reset and click on run. Restart. So here you can see the demo is changed to Simplilearn. So this is how we get started with MVC application. From here you can modify all this. Go back to the Visual Studio and modify. If you click on home, this will come back to the same home page. If you click on privacy, it shows this page. So this was about the template model view controller. What are web APIs? The ASP.NET Web API is a framework for creating HTTP-based services that can be used in a variety of applications on a variety of platforms such as web, games, Windows, and mobile. On the .NET framework, ASP.NET Web API is an excellent foundation for developing RESTful apps. Some of the examples of Web API are Microsoft Graph. Microsoft Graph is a collection of APIs that gives us information back out of our Microsoft account. Azure DevOps. Azure DevOps, we can get information about DevOps pipeline using the Azure DevOps API. Cognitive services. We can use cognitive services if we are interested in adding machine learning. PlayFab. PlayFab is a set of APIs for games. Features of Web APIs. The ASP.NET Web API platform is suitable for creating RESTful services. The ASP.NET Web API is based on ASP.NET and uses ASP.NET Request Response Pipeline. HTTP Hypertext Transfer Protocol verbs are mapped to method names in the ASP.NET Web API. Web API can be hosted on IIS or any other web server that supports .NET version 4.0 and more. ASP.NET Web API supports different data types like .json, XML, and many other formats that are supported natively. To interface with Web API Server, the ASP.NET Web API Framework contains a new HTTP client. HTTP client can be used in ASP.NET and MVC server-side applications. Now let us look at the demo. In this demo, we will create a web API project. First, let's go to Visual Studio. Launch the Visual Studio. Create a new project. Scroll down and search for ASP.NET Core Web API. This project template is used for creating an ASP.NET Core application with an example controller for a RESTful HTTP service. So select this template and click on Next. Provide the project name. Since we are showing a demo, I'll name it as Demo Web API. Click on Next and click on Create. So here you can see the project is successfully created. On the right hand side, if you can see, we have startup and program.cs file. If you notice here in controllers, we have weather forecast controller.cs. Open this. In this, we have a single get method. This method receives request for weather data and returns some response. If you also notice here, we have weather forecast.cs. Open this. In this, we have the class weather forecast. The function of this class is to form the structure of information that we want to return from our API. So let's go ahead and run this. Click on this green arrow mark and run. The build has started. It's running on the local host. This is the output. It shows the date and the temperature in Celsius and the temperature in Fahrenheit and the summary.
So in this video, we are going to create a login application which has a username, password and a login button. So before we begin, make sure you have subscribed to our YouTube channel and clicked on the bell icon so you never miss an update from Simplilearn. Watch the video till the end so that you don't miss on the demo. So without wasting any further time, let's get started. So let's go to Visual Studio. After opening Visual Studio, on the left hand side you have all the recent applications which you have opened, and on the right hand side you have the options to clone a repository, which means you can get a code from an online repository like GitHub or Azure DevOps, or you can open an existing project or a solution, or you can open a local folder or create a new project. So we'll create a new project. Once you create a new project, here you can select the template. So we'll search for the ASP.NET Web Application template. So in the search for template search box, type ASP.NET Web Application. So here you can see we have two ASP.NET Web Application .NET Framework templates. The difference between these two is this template uses Visual Basic and this template uses C#. So we will select the template which uses C#. This template is basically used for creating ASP.web application, web forms, MVC or web API applications. So select this template and click on Next and provide a suitable project name. Since we are creating a sign-in page, I have entered the project name as sign-in project. Similarly, if you want to change the location, you can change the location and provide the solution name and select the framework version which you want. So I'll keep the default framework. The latest one in my system is 4.7.2. So click on create. So here we need to select a template. whether we want empty, web forms, MVC, web API, or single page application. Empty, it is basically a template which does not have any content in it. And web form is a template for creating web form applications. It is used to build dynamic websites using the familiar drag and drop functionality. It has the event driven model. Similarly, if we look at MVC, this template allows to build applications using the model view controller architecture. So model view controller has the features that enable fast test driven development for creating applications that use the latest standard. And we have web API. Web API is used for creating RESTful HTTP services that can reach a broad range of clients including browsers and mobile devices. And we have single page application. This template is basically used to create client-side JavaScript-driven HTML5 application using ASP.NET Web API. So for this project, we will select MVC and we'll not change any authentication and keep all the settings as it is and click on create. So here we go, we have successfully created the project. So if you look at the right hand side in the solution explorer, we have a list of folders. So we have the root folder. This is the root folder. So the default root folder is used for storing the static files related to the project, and those files can be accessed programmatically with the relative path. And we have the controller folder. So this controller folder contains controller classes where the operation related code is written. The model folder contains the domain or entity classes. Models can be written anywhere in the solution, such as in separate class library or folder, etc. Similarly, we have views folder. So the views folder holds the eraser pages which are responsible for showing and getting the data from the user. Similarly, in the folders, we will have an app setting.json file. This folder contains the configuration and secret details of the application, and we will have the program.cs file. The program.cs file is the starting point of the application, which will create the host for an application to run the application. And we will have the startup.cs file. So this startup.cs file allows to configure the behavior of the application, such as defining the routes and dependency injection. So we'll get started with this. So we'll run the application and see the default output. So the build has started. So this is the default output where we have application name, home, home page, about, and contact. So what we'll do is we'll create a login page, that is a sign-in page here. So we'll go back to Visual Studio, go to Solution Explorer, right click on the controller folder, add a controller, select MVC controller empty and click on add. And name the controller. So we will keep it as default controller and click on add. Next go to models, right click on add and add a class. Select the class and click on add. Here you can see a class is created. So what we'll do is we'll rename this class, right click, rename, and we'll rename this as user controller class. Once the class is renamed, go inside this public class and write a code. Type prop and double tap. So the first property will be of the type integer and it will be a number, ID number. Similarly, second property prop and double tap will be of the type string, and this will be username. Similarly, third So after writing this code, go back to the default controller. Here, go to the action result index page, right click and click on add view. And here you can see it contains MVC5 view. Select this and click on add and provide the index name. So I'll keep it as it is and select the template. In the template it has create, delete, details, edit, empty, list, all these templates, but we'll select the create template and select the model class. Select the user controller. This was the model class which we created, user controller. So select user controller and in the options select create as partial view, then click on add. Here you can see this page is created. So we'll run this page and see the output. So here you can see this is the sign in page which we created. We have the number, username and password. So what we'll do, we'll make some changes. We'll change this create button to sign in button and we'll change this user controller. So we'll go back to the Visual Studio and here you can see we have user controller. We'll change it to sign in page. We'll go down and we'll change the create button to sign in button. So we'll save this and click on run. So here you can see this is changed to sign in page and the button is changed to sign in. So you can enter the any value here, new number, and enter the username, password and click on sign. What is a web API? The ASP.NET Web API framework is used to create HTTP services that may be accessed by a variety of clients, including browsers, mobile phones, and tablets. ASP.NET Web API is the extension of WCF REST API. In a nutshell, it's a replacement for the WCF REST API. It's compatible with ASP.NET MVC and other web applications, such as ASP.NET Web Forms. ASP.NET Web API is an excellent foundation for developing RESTful apps. So what is this WCF REST API? WCF stands for Windows Communication Foundation, is a communication framework that may be used to create web services in .NET. It is secure, dependable, and scalable. It offers an uniform programming model for service-oriented application development. ASP.NET is quite similar to ASP.NET MVC. because of its MVC capabilities like routing, controllers, action results, filters, model binders, IOC container, and dependency injection. ASP.NET Web API is an excellent foundation for developing RESTful apps. RESTful apps, that is, the representational state transfer, is an architecture paradigm that follows the concepts of REST architecture principles. The concept of resources support the REST architecture. The concept of resources that supports the REST architecture may be the use of resources to express an application state and functionality. Over the HTTP protocol, these resources are identified using URLs. Now let us look at the examples of Web API. The first one is Twitter API. Twitter API allows you to show tweets on your website using the Twitter API. Then we have YouTube API. This allows you to embed videos from YouTube on your website. Facebook API allows to display information from Facebook onto the website. Similarly, we have Microsoft Graph. Microsoft Graph is a collection of APIs that give us information back out of our Microsoft account. Next, we have Azure DevOps. Using Azure DevOps, we can get information about DevOps pipeline using the Azure DevOps API. Cognitive services. We can use cognitive services if we are interested in adding machine learning. PlayFab. PlayFab is a set of APIs for games. Why use an web API? To reach users, a web-based application is insufficient. People use iPhones, mobile phones, and tablets and other devices on regular basis. These smartphones also come with a plethora of apps that makes life easier. In fact, we are migrating away from the web towards the realm of apps. So if you want to expose your service data to browsers and all of these contemporary devices apps in a quick and easy way, you will need an API that's compatible with both browser and devices. Web API is an excellent foundation for making your data and service available to a wide range of devices. Web API is an appropriate platform for developing RESTful applications using the .NET framework because of its open source. Unlike WCF REST API, it uses all of the HTTP features, and you don't have to declare any additional configuration for different devices. Now let us look at some of the key features of Web API. Features of Web API. The ASP.NET Web API platform is suitable for creating RESTful services. The ASP.NET Web API is based on ASP.NET and uses the ASP.NET request response pipeline. HTTP verbs are mapped to method names in the ASP.NET Web API. IIS self-hosted or any other web server that supports .NET 4.0 version or above can host ASP.NET Web API. Different data types are supported by ASP.NET Web API. JSON, XML, and different JSON formats are all supported natively. To interface with the Web API server, the ASP.NET Web API framework contains a new HTTP client. HTTP client can be used in ASP.NET MVC server-side applications, window forms applications, console application, and other applications. Let us look at the different versions of Web API. The first Web API version is 1.0. It is supported by .NET Framework 4.0 and it coincides with ASP.NET Model View Controller 4. The current version of Web API is version 2.0. It is supported by .NET Framework 4.5 and coincides with ASP.NET MVC 5. Let's see the difference between ASP.NET Web API and ASP.NET MVC. ASP.NET Web API is used to create fully fledged HTTP service that can only return data and not views. Whereas ASP.NET MVC is used to construct online applications that return both views and data. Web API allows to create RESTful services using the .NET framework, and it also enables content negotiation and self-hosting. Whereas in ASP.NET MVC it doesn't support this. Web API returns data in specific format such as JSON, XML, or any other, whereas MVC only returns data in JSON format. In Web API, the request is translated to actions based on HTTP verbs in Web API, whereas in MVC, it is mapped to action names. Similarly, Web API is lightweight design that may be used with smartphone apps in addition to web applications. When we have a controller that is both MVC and Web API and want to implement an authorization, we must construct two filters, one for MVC and one for Web API, because they both are different. Now let us look at an introduction to HTTP. The HTTP protocol can be used to access a web API over the internet. It's framework for creating and developing HTTP-based RESTful services. Hypertext Transfer Protocol is a protocol for retrieving resources such as HTML documents. It is the foundation of any data interchange on the internet, and it is a client-server protocol, meaning that the requests are started by the recipient, which is commonly the web browser. Text, layout descriptions, photos, videos, scripts, and other subdocuments are fetched, and a complete document is reconstructed for them. CRUD operations can be mapped to the four primary HTTP methods, that is get, put, post, and delete. Get fetches the resource's representation at a given URL, and put changes the state of resource at a given URL. Post is used to create a new resource, and delete removes a resource from a given URL. Hypertext Transfer Protocol is a request-response protocol that communicates between a client and a server. A client, that is a browser, sends an HTTP request to the server, which is then responded by the server. The answer may include the requested content as well as the status information about the request. So this is an example of HTTP request. The client submits a request to the server via the HTTP protocol, and the server and the web browser respond to the client based on the request. Every HTTP request has three parts: a request line, a request header, and a request body, and the request body is optional. Request line defines the method which instructs the server on how to handle the data or resource, and the request header contains a request URL which is used to locate the requested resource to the server. It also defines which version of HTTP protocol is being used. This is an example of HTTP response. HTTP response is a server response with the goal of providing the client with the request resources. Now let's have a look at the server's response. This is how the response header status line looks like. The HTTP protocol version, status code, and reason phrase are all included, and this is known as status line. And the response header, one or more response header lines can be present, and they are used to transmit additional information from the server to the client. The response body contains the resource that client has requested. If the request fails, the response body specifies the cause for the failure, as well as the steps and the client must do to complete the request successfully. Let us see how to set up the development environment. The prerequisite is we need to have Visual Studio installed in our device and .NET Software Development Kit. So let's jump into the browser and see how to install this. First of all, we need to install Visual Studio, Microsoft Visual Studio. To install that, go to visualstudio.microsoft.com, and in Downloads, go to the Downloads, and here you can install the community version, which is free. So Microsoft Visual Studio is an integrated development environment from Microsoft. It is used to develop computer programs as well as websites, web apps, and web services and mobile apps. Then after this, we need to go to .NET.microsoft.com. Here you can install the software development kit with the latest version. Scroll down, select your operating system, and select the installer which you want to install. Then we need to install the SQL Server Management Studio. Just go to the browser and type download SSMS, and it will take you to this website. Here scroll down, and you can click here to download free download for SQL Server Management Studio. So after installing these three softwares, you are ready for the demo. Now finally, let us look at the demo. Let's go to the Visual Studio. Open Visual Studio Code. I have Visual Studio 2019 installed in my device. So on the left hand side you can see the recently opened projects. On the right hand side you have these options where we can clone a repository. In clone a repository we can get code from an online repository like GitHub or Azure DevOps, or we can open an existing project or a solution. Similarly, we can open a local folder and we can create a new project. So let's create a new project. Here there are many templates. You can explore all the templates. Just scroll down. You have many number of templates. So for this project, we will be using ASP.NET Web Application.NET Framework. So basically we have two ASP.NET Web Application.NET Framework. One is using Visual Basic and the other one is using C#. So we'll select the one with the C#, ASP.NET Web Application.NET Framework. Select this and click on Next. Provide the project name. I'll keep the default project name, Web Application 9, and you can change the location if you want. So I'll keep the default location, and if you want the solution name, you can change it and select the latest framework. So I have the .NET Framework 4.7.2, the recent one. So I'll keep it as it is, and next click on Create. So here you have the following templates. So you need to select one among these templates. So empty is a template where there is no content in it. And web forms. Web forms in ASP.NET is the extend the event-driven interaction concepts to web application. The browser sends a web form to the web server, which responds with a full markup page or a HTML page. All users' actions on the client are sent to the server for stateful processing in web forms. Or you can select MVC. So MVC basically it is a project template for creating ASP.NET MVC applications, model view controller applications. So it allows us to build applications using the model view controller architecture. And similarly we have Web API. Web API is a project template for creating RESTful HTTP services. And we have single page application that is used for creating rich client-side JavaScript driven HTML5 applications, and it is a single page application so that provides a rich user experience which includes client-side interactions using HTML, CSS and JavaScript. So for this project we will select empty and we will check these boxes MVC and Web API. Since we are using a Web API here, so we'll check these two boxes and keep the authentication as it is. With no authentication, don't change it, and keep these options as it is and click on create. So here we go, we have successfully created the project. So on the right hand side you can see the solution explorer. So before we start with the project, I'll explain you the different folders that are present in the Solution Explorer. So first of all, we'll have the root folder. So the root folder is the default root folder for storing the static files related to the project, and those files can be accessed programmatically with relative path. And similarly, we have controller folder. The controller folder contains the controller classes where the operation related code is written. Similarly, we have model folder. Model folder contains the domain or entity classes. Models can be written anywhere in the solution, such as in separate class libraries or folder, etc. And we have views folder. In views folder, the view folder holds the razor pages which are responsible for showing and getting the data from the users. And we have app settings.json file. So this app setting.json folder contains the configuration and secret details of the application. And similarly, we will have program.cs file. So program.cs file in Solution Explorer, it is the file that is the starting point of the application, which will create the host for an application to run the application. and we will have startup.cs file. The startup.cs file allows to configure the behavior of the application, such as defining the routes, dependency injection. So that was about the few of the folders in Solution Explorer. As we go further, we'll explore other folders in detail. So ASP.NET Web API, basically it returns data only. The data may be from the database, and it does not return any view or user interface. And ASP.NET Web API returns data in either XML format or JSON format. So whenever you run an application, so suppose if we make an application here and run an application, the application start methods get invoked. So whenever you run an application, the first thing that happens is the application start method gets invoked. So where is this method? So this method is in global.asax folder. Let's open this. So you can see here application start. So as you can see here application start, this is the method which gets invoked first whenever we run an application. So basically this method checks the routing. So as you can see here in this line, we have the system object sender. The object sender supports all classes in the .NET framework. The class hierarchy provides low-level services to the derived classes. This is the ultimate base class of all the classes in .NET Framework. It is the root of the type hierarchy, and we also have event argument. It represents a base class for the classes that contains event data and provides a value to use for events that do not include event data. We have area registration. So area registration provides a way to register one or more areas in an ASP.NET MVC application. And this register all areas, this is a register where all areas in ASP.NET MVC application are registered. And we have global configuration.configure. In this line, what happens is global configuration provides a global HTTP configuration for an ASP.NET application. And the register route store the URL routes for an application. And what is this route table? So basically route table gets a collection of objects that derive from the route base class, and it returns an object that contains all the routes in the collection. So now the question is, where is the route file? So to find the route file, go to the app start, go to this folder. In this folder we have two files, routeconfig.cs and webAPIconfig.cs. So this routeconfig.cs stores the routes and webAPIconfig.cs stores the web APIs. So open this routeconfig.cs. So this is the file where we have class route configuration. So as you can see here, route config, this is the public class, and we have register routes, route collection. So route collection, it provides a collection of routes for ASP.NET routing. And we have the parameter routes dot ignore route. So ignore route ignores the specified URL route for the given list of available routes. And this class system dot string represents the text as a sequence of code units. And we have map route. Map route maps the specified URL route and sets the default route values and returns a reference to the mapped routes. Similarly, we have three parameters, that is name, URL, and defaults. Name is a string and URL is the controller. We have controller, action, and ID. ID is optional and default are the objects. So we have three objects here, controller, action, and ID, and we have specified ID as optional. So basically this routeconfig.cs is the MVC application where the routes are present. So now the question is, where are the web API routes? So the web API routes are in the web API config.cs file. So open this file. So as you can see here, the public static class web API config. So we have web API configuration and services and web API routes here. So config.routes.map HTTP route. So here the route gets the HTTP route collection associated with this HTTP configuration instance. So what is this map HTTP route? Map HTTP route maps the specified route template and sets the default route values, and it returns a reference to the mapped route. It has a string, a route template, and object default. So it has a string named as default API and a route template with API controller, and we have default object as ID is equal to route parameter, which is optional. So this ID is equal to route parameter optional. This is the route parameter class that can be used to indicate properties about a route parameter. Now we have understood about routes and web APIs. So now let us go to the controller folder. So as you can see, this is empty folder, but before that we will close these files. So go to the controller folder, right click and go to add and add a controller, and go to web API, and here you can see web API to controller empty. So here we have 5 different types of web API controllers. One is the empty, the other one is web API to controller with actions using entity framework. Similarly, we have web API controller with read and write actions. We have controller with actions using entity framework and with read and write actions for data version v3. So for this project, we will select web API to controller empty. So select this, add it. So we need to provide the controller name. So we will keep as it is default controller. So we'll provide it as default data controller as the controller name. So controller is mandatory to be kept in the name, and you can change the other part. So we have provided the name. Now let's click on add. So this is the default data controller which got created. So namespace, this is the name of the project, and as you can see here with the extension controller. So this is the controller which we have created, and the name of the controller is default data controller. So this API controller, it basically defines the property and method for an API controller. So next we'll write a few lines of code here. First we'll call a string, we'll keep it public. String, we'll call the array of string. We'll call it as my data is equal. So we'll declare some values in the string, say data1, data2, and data3. So just randomly I've called some values just to for an example. So next we'll call another string, we'll keep it as public string array of string. Then we'll use the get method, get data. Next we'll return this data, return my data. So we'll save this. Next we'll click on run. So the build has started. So we need to call the controller, web API controller which we created. For that, first enter the API, then slash the controller name. So the controller which we created was default data. Next, content. So here we go. This is the array of string in XML format. So this was the strings which we created. XML is the extensible markup language. XML is basically used to describe data. The XML standard is a flexible way to create information formats and share structured data via the public internet. So how XML basically works? So it works by providing a predictable data format. XML is strict on formatting. If the formatting is off, programs that process or display the encoded data will return an error.
So this is the registration form which we are going to create, wherein we will have employee name, employee ID, date of birth, department, country with drop down, and address, contact number, and the gender. And we will create a save button. So this is the registration form we are going to create. So we'll get started. We'll jump into Visual Studio. Go to Visual Studio, click on create new project. Scroll down and select ASP.NET Web Application.NET Framework. Select this template and click on Next. And enter the project name. Since we are creating a registration form, I'll enter the project name as registration form. Click on Create. So basically we are creating a web form. So select web form. Click on Create. So here you can see the project registration form is successfully created. If you scroll down here in the Solution Explorer, you will see Site Master. Open this. So this is the file which has the home, about, and all the contact page information. So let us run this file. It has started. So this is the output wherein we have the application name, home, about, and contact. So what we'll do is we'll create another heading called registration, inside which we will create a registration form. So for that we'll go back to the site master page in the Visual Studio. So next to contact we'll create another heading. For that we'll copy this and paste, and we'll rename it as registration. And we'll change the link. Save this. Let's go back and check it. So here you can see registration is added. So go back to Visual Studio, go to the registration form, right click, go to add new item. In add new item, select the template web form with master page. Select this, name the web form. So I'll name it as employee registration, employee registration. Click on add. Select site.master and click on OK. So this is the employee registration page which we have created. So go back to site master and add the link here to the registration page. And save it. If you want to change the footer, you can change the footer here. So let us go back to the employee registration page and create the registration form here. So here I have pasted a few lines of code. Firstly, I have created a section ID. So the section HTML element, basically it represents a generic standalone section of a document, so which doesn't have a more specific element to represent it. And ID is a global attribute that defines an identifier. So I have created a section ID called main content and a section class called wrapper. So class is an attribute which specifies one or more class names for an HTML element. So the class attribute can be used on any HTML element. So we have created a div class called row. So div is the content division element. It is a generic container for flow content. So here we have created a div class called column large, that is 12,000 pixel. The pixel numbers are the breakpoints. Similarly, we have div class column medium 4. So this is basically for a maximum width of the container, that is 720 pixel, and we have written the heading in h1, that is the registration form. So we'll save this and run and see the output. So here you can see we have created the heading registration form. Now we'll go back and create the employee name, department and other details. Similarly, so now we'll create the columns for employee name and employee details. So after the header, I'll paste a small 3-4 lines of code. So basically here I have created a class called panel body, and inside the class row with the column medium of length that is greater than 720 pixel. So basically here I have created the column employee name. Let us save this and click on run. So here you can see we have created the employee name. So similarly, we'll create the employee ID, details, contact number, and the country. So go back to Visual Studio. So similarly, now we have created employee name. After creating the employee name, I have pasted a small code wherein we have created the employee ID, same as the employee name. Similarly, we have created the date of birth, and we have created department and the country. For country, we have created a drop down with a list of items. So we have provided the list of country names, that is India, Pakistan, China, and so on. Similarly, we have created a column for address, and if we scroll down, we have created a column for contact number and for gender. And for gender, we have provided the list, and we have at last created a save button. To create a button, we have created a class, and we have now provided the ID as button save. So let's save this and click on run and see the output. So you can see here, so we have successfully created the registration form with the employee name. So we can enter the employee name and employee ID and date of birth. Date of birth, you can select the month, year and the day. Similarly, enter the department, country, and enter the address, contact number, select the category and click on save. So this is the registration form. So we have successfully created the registration form. We'll first start with who is an ASP.NET developer. ASP.NET developer is responsible for designing solutions and monitoring existing and new applications. The responsibilities of ASP.NET developers include writing code, designing solutions for applications, managing performance, analyzing requirements, and improving functionality. To be successful as an ASP.NET developer, one must demonstrate excellent problem-solving skills, high-quality coding skills, and the ability to manage time efficiently. Skills of an ASP.NET developer. Let us first look at some of the technical skills that are required for an ASP.NET developer. Firstly, we have .NET. .NET is a free cross-platform open source framework for building different applications. Knowledge of coding using .NET languages. ASP.NET Core MVC. ASP.NET Core MVC is an application framework that allows you to create modern web apps by using the MVC architectural pattern. Servers and database. SQL Server is a relationship database management system, or RDBMS, developed and marketed by Microsoft. The other skills are client-side technologies such as jQuery, HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. Developers should possess good understanding of these client-side technologies. Some of the non-technical skills are: the ASP.NET developer should be very creative, and he should have good strategic planning, and he should have good communication skills. Similarly, good analytical skills and problem-solving skills and the time management skills come in handy. Now let us look at ASP.NET developer responsibilities. The ASP.NET developer is responsible for developing high-quality software. He is responsible for working with front-end developers and supporting and improving functionalities, making most use of up-to-date and relevant technologies. He is also responsible for creating and designing application layers, assuring that certain performance standard is always met. And he should be good at writing background server-side code. And finally, he should have good analyzing skills and need to develop new features. ASP.NET developer salaries. In India, the average salary for an ASP.NET developer is 3,26,000 per annum, whereas the average salary ranges from 1,45,000 to a maximum of 7,14,000 rupees. Whereas in USA, the average salary for an ASP.NET developer is $68,000, and it ranges from minimum of $41,000 to $93,000 per annum. Finally, we will look at ASP.NET developer resume. This is the sample resume for ASP.NET developer. Firstly, we need to fill in the personal information. We need to give our name, location, email address, and phone number. Then we need to give a brief intro about yourself and the objective. Then we need to mention the projects that we have worked on. We need to clearly depict the goal of each project. Then we need to provide internships that is done during the course of studies or after the studies. Then we need to provide education and final degree with score. And the most important thing is we need to provide technical skills. The technical skills depend on the job role. For an ASP.NET developer, you need to provide the languages first which you are proficient in, then similarly provide the frameworks, the SQL Server, and other server-side technologies. Similarly, mention some of the non-technical skills. If you have work experience, then please mention previous professional experience. The interview plays a vital role in any job selection process. For that reason, preparation is key. Technical questions are part of the interview process which impact more in the interview. Hey everyone, I welcome you all to this session. In this session, we will see ASP.NET interview questions with answers. If you're planning to start your career as a developer, you have to possess some development skills that empower your ability to crack the interview. If you want to make a career in software development and improve your chances, then this video on ASP.NET interview questions and answers will help you make your preparation easy. But before we begin, make sure you have subscribed to our YouTube channel and clicked on the bell icon, so you never miss an update from Simplilearn. So without wasting any further time, let's get started. We will look at the first category of ASP.NET interview questions, that is beginner level interview questions. What is ASP.NET? ASP.NET is a server-side technology used for developing dynamic websites and web applications on the internet. It also produces data-driven web application. Microsoft released ASP.NET in 2002 to build dynamic websites and web applications using the .NET framework. What platform does ASP.NET use? ASP.NET is a cross-platform which works on the .NET framework and runs on Linux, Windows, Mac OS and Docker. What is the ASP.NET Lifecycle, and list the types of lifecycle? When ASP.NET pages run, it goes through several steps of the lifecycle, which performs a series of actions like initialization, running, restoring and rendering. Lifecycle is classified into two categories: application lifecycle and page lifecycle. In application lifecycle, the user requests for accessing the application. Page lifecycle has phases like initialization, restoring, execution, and page rendering. What is MVC? So MVC is basically a software architectural pattern that divides an application into three main parts, that is model, view, and controller. Model helps to create the data domain of the application and represents the public properties and business logic of the application. View represents the data tables, charts, and diagrams by collecting the data from the model. Controller. The controller helps in handling the user interactions and controls the flow of the application. List the languages used for ASP.NET. ASP.NET uses object-oriented programming languages that provide a framework and patterns which are easy to use. Languages used by ASP.NET framework are C# or VB.NET. C# is a programming language developed by Microsoft that runs on the .NET framework. It is used for developing web applications on the .NET framework. VB.NET is a modern object-oriented programming language developed by Microsoft to combine the features of CLR and .NET. What type of library is used in ASP.NET? A library is a pre-coded object-oriented programming template collection used to develop web-based and desktop applications in ASP.NET. ASP.NET uses a web library to develop web applications. What is CLR? CLR is the basic common language runtime virtual machine component of the .NET framework used to run the code. It manages the executing .NET programs and implements a virtual execution system internally. Services that CLR provide are verification, garbage collection, security, and memory management. What is IIS and why do you use it? Internet Information Server (IIS) is the most popular web server used to host and provide internet-based services to ASP.NET and ASP web applications. IIS has its own process engine to handle the request. Using an IIS computer, one can work as a web server and provides functionally to deploy ASP.NET web applications. It is also responsible for providing responses to the requests made by the users. List the types of application lifecycle. Application lifecycle is of 5 types: application start, object creation, HTTP application, dispose, and application end. Application start is a method that you execute when a user makes a request. Object creation contains all the information about current request and browsing information. HTTP application processes all subsequent requests sent to the application. Dispose is responsible for releasing manually unwanted resources. Application end helps to unload the memory of an application. List the advantages of using ASP.NET. ASP.NET is a development framework. that is used for developing web applications, it is one of the most preferred web development technologies at present. There are a lot of benefits of using ASP.NET. Here are some of its advantages. Applications created using ASP.NET show better performance. ASP.NET provides multi-development modes for the applications. Applications created using ASP.NET can be used across the globe. ASP.NET is a language independent. What is an active server page? Active server page is an HTML page used to develop dynamic web pages. It includes one or more scripts on the Microsoft web server before sending the request to the user. ASP was first released in December 1996. It is used to generate the content that is sent to the client web browser via the HTTP response. Describe web forms. Web forms are web pages that a user requests using a browser. It is built using ASP.NET technology. It executes on the server and generates output to the browser. It also allows you to add and create custom controls. Some of the custom controls provided by ASP.NET are label, text box, button, hyperlink, and image button. What is a Solution Explorer? Solution Explorer displays the folder and files of a project that appears on a physical hard drive. List the components of ASP.NET. ASP.NET provides data-driven web applications on the internet using various components. Some of the components are Common Language Runtime, Language, Library, Common Type System, and Windows Forms. What is the difference between ASP and ASP.NET? ASP is the first server-side scripting language developed by Microsoft to design dynamic web forms, whereas ASP.NET is a server-side technology used for developing dynamic websites and web applications on the internet. ASP uses ADO, that is ActiveX Data Objects, to connect with the database, whereas ASP.NET uses ADO.NET to connect with the database. ASP is written in VB script. ASP.NET is written in C#. What type of protocol is used to call web service? Web service is a web-based functionality accessed by using protocols. It uses XML to exchange the software using common internet protocols. Web service in ASP.NET has three aspects. They are creating web service, creating a proxy, consuming the web service. The HTTP protocol is used in ASP.NET to call a web service. Explain uses of global.asax. Global file is used to execute the application level events and set application level variables. Global.asax is used to handle high-level applications like application start, session end, and session start. Now let us look at some of the intermediate level ASP.NET interview questions and answers. What is a web library? Web library is a part of a website that accesses all libraries from the browser and helps in adding collections online. It contains base and user-defined data types. It supports to create web services. Describe a view state. View state is a page-level state management technique that is used to preserve the values of the page and controls. View state contains the sections like features, background, scenario, and class reference. What is a multi-view? Multi-view is a parent control for the view. It is used to control all types of the view. Multi-view has the prefix MV. This is the syntax of multi-view. What is early binding? Early binding is used to check the methods and properties during compilation. It is fast and easy to code and also reduces the compilation time. It also reduces the time by identifying the errors. What is late binding? Late binding takes more time to compile. It is hard to find out the object through late binding. Late binding has dynamic objects and is achieved by virtual machines. How ASP.NET is different from ASP.NET Core. ASP.NET is used to build applications for Windows, whereas ASP.NET Core is used for Windows, Mac OS, and Linux. ASP.NET uses .NET Framework, whereas ASP.NET Core uses .NET Core Framework. ASP.NET is a single version. ASP.NET Core has multiple versions. What is caching? Caching is a technique used to sort the user data or information in memory. It boosts the performance of the applications and creates pages automatically. Caching is also essential for data-related transactions. What is the role of page directives? Page directives describe the attributes of specific page file for the compiler. Below is the syntax of page directives, where code file specifies the name of code behind the file, and debug enables or specifies compilation debug, and client name specifies the class name of the page, and the client target browsers the server controls. List the types of states in ASP.NET. State in ASP.NET is used to store the information between request and to retrieve it when required and holding the information. ASP.NET provides 4 types of states: application state, cookie state, view state, and session state. Application state. In this state, all collections of web pages and files in a single directory on a web server. Cookie state. It stores the information on the client machine. View state states the state of web pages and its control. Session state. This state is used to sort the application data. List the sources of data allowed by ASP.NET. Data sources are responsible for operations like insertion, deletion, sorting, and updates. Some of the data sources allowed by ASP.NET are SQL data source, object data source, and access data source. List the events of calendar control. Calendar control is a function used to provide a calendar on a web page. It also enables you to change and move to the previous months and years. The events of calendar control are of 3 types: selection changed, day render, and visible month changed. What is a trace? Tracing enables view diagnostic information about a single request at runtime and debug the application. The trace contains features, backgrounds, code examples, and class references. How can we add a style sheet in Visual Studio? To add a style sheet, open Solution Explorer and right-click on the option, then click on New, and a pop-up will appear to choose. How can a page layout help in ASP.NET? Page layout provides an overall container for the pages on the website. For example, navigation area and footer. Page layout also includes the main event. List the advantages of using HTML server controls. HTML server controls are the standard HTML controls used to enable server-side processing. Some of the advantages of using HTML server controls are: HTML server control does not possess any mechanism to identify the capabilities of a client browser. Coding can be easy by adding run@=server attribute. Controls can interact with the client-side scripting. Explain about event bubbling. Event bubbling is used by data-bound controls. When a parent control contains child controls, and when an event occurs in the child controls, it bubbles the event to the parent. This is called event bubbling. Event bubbling is classified into 2 categories: on-bubble event that handles the event data, rise bubble event that sends the event data. List the most common built-in objects of ASP.NET. Built-in objects access the information from the web server. It is also responsible for recognizing the client who is accessing the web page. Some of the commonly built-in objects of ASP.NET are context, application, request, server, trace, and response. List types of caching. Caching is a technique used to sort the user data or information in memory. Caching is divided into three types. Output caching, it specifies the duration of cache and the attribute. Fragment caching, it is user-controlled caching used in a basic web form page. Data caching, it is used for caching the data of the data source controls. What are breakpoints? Breakpoint helps to specify the runtime to run a line and stop the execution. It is used to examine and perform various debugging functions and methods. Now let us look at some of the advanced level interview questions. List any 5 web controls in ASP.NET. Web controls are HTML elements used for script tagging and functionality for web forms and pages. The 5 web controls in ASP.NET are as follows: HTML controls, HTML server controls, user and custom controls, ASP.NET server controls, ASP.NET AJAX server controls. What are button controls? Button controls in ASP.NET are used to display a push button on a web page. This is the syntax for button controls, where you provide button ID and run at server, and the text is of the type button. What is range validator and its syntax? Range validator checks the input values that lie in between the specified ranges. Range validator has 3 main properties, that is type, minimum value, and maximum value. This is the syntax of range validator, wherein we have provided minimum value as 1 and maximum value as 6, and it is of the type integer. What is a thread priority? In multithreading, each thread has its own priority that gains access to CPU resources. Whenever a thread is created in C#, it always possesses some priority. It is mainly used to set a value. What is the role of postback in ASP.NET? Postback is a request sent from a client to the server from the page on which the user is working. It posts the complete page back to the server for a new page. Postback is submitted to a server before processing the page and holds credentials such as verification like username and password using a database. List the types of authentication in ASP.NET. Authentication is a process of ensuring the user identity. It is divided into 4 types: form authentication, Windows authentication, custom authentication, and passport authentication. Define web configuration. Web configuration is used to describe the property and behavior of web applications. It also helps to manage settings. Each file of a web configuration is an XML file that contains a set of configuration elements. Explain client-side script events. Client-side script runs on the browser and speeds up the execution of the page. Some of the client-side events are as follows. On click, it is used when the control is clicked. On focus, it is used when control receives the focus. On change is used when the value of control is changed. On blur is used when the control loses focus. On key press is used when the user presses the key. What is anonymous personalization? Anonymous personalization helps and allows the user to personalize the site before identifying themselves. For example, enable anonymous identification by passing the value true, provide the cookie name, cookie timeout and cookie path, and set cookie sliding expiration as true, and keep the cookie protection encrypted and cookieless is equal to user. What is form-based authentication? Form-based authentication is used to edit the web configuration files and add a login page to authenticate. It is used for web applications. Form-based authentication also provides a way to handle authentication using custom logics in ASP.NET applications. Define the types of configuration files. Configuration files help to manage the settings of a website. Settings of configuration files are stored as XML files which are separate from the application. Configuration files are of two types: web configuration and machine configuration. Web configuration contains the machine-specific value for all settings of the applications. Machine configurations help to extend, restrict, and override the settings. List the different types of cookies used in ASP.NET. Cookies are a small piece of information stored at the client side. The cookies in ASP.NET are provided into two types: session cookie, valid for a single session; persistent cookie, valid for multiple sessions. Explain the difference between custom controls and user controls. Custom controls is designed for a single application, whereas user control is designed for multiple applications. Custom control is loosely coupled. User control is tightly coupled. User interface can be changed in custom control, whereas in user controls, the user interface is fixed. Explain the difference between web configuration and machine configuration files. Web configuration is automatically created when an application is created, whereas machine configuration is automatically installed with the Visual Studio. In web configuration, file inherits settings from the machine configuration, whereas in machine configuration, only one machine configuration exists. We will start with the beginner level ASP.NET MVC interview questions and answers. What is MVC? MVC is a software architectural pattern that divides an application into three major components. MVC stands for Model, View, and Controller. The model represents the shape of the data and stores the data that it retrieves from the database. View is a user interface used to represent the data of the application as tables, charts, and diagrams. It also communicates with model and controllers easily. Controller. The controller in MVC holds the user's request. It handles the HTTP request made by the user. Explain the lifecycle of MVC. Lifecycle is a series of steps used to handle the request to change the state of the application. The lifecycle of MVC is divided into two categories: application lifecycle and request lifecycle. Application lifecycle runs the IIS application until it stops. The request lifecycle handles the HTTP request of the application. List the advantages of using MVC. MVC has a lot of advantages with building the application. Some of them are: MVC provides separation of components that allows the reuse of applications across the several platforms. MVC allows applications to change features like layouts, fonts, and colors without affecting the entire architecture of the application. MVC uses asynchronous techniques to build applications that can be easy for a developer to build application in a faster and secure way. What are the actions, and list a few of them? Action methods in MVC execute the request and generate the response. Actions have one-to-one mapping with the user. Here is a list of few of the actions. Content result, it returns a string. File path result, it returns the file path content. File content result, it returns file content. JavaScript result, it returns the script for execution. JSON result, it returns JSON formatted data. View result, it helps to receive a response for the view engine. And file stream result, it returns file content. And redirect to result, it helps to redirect to the specified URL. What are actions filters, and list the types of action filters? Action filters are attributes that apply to the controller or a controller action that helps in modifying the executed actions. MVC framework includes several actions. Some of them are output catch. Output catch catches the output of a controller at a specific time. Handle error. Handle error handles the error when it executes an action. Authorize. Authorize enables you to restrict access for a control. What are action verbs? Action verbs are HTTP requests applied to the action methods to work for HTTP request methods. Some of the action verbs are HTTP post, HTTP get, HTTP put, and HTTP delete. What are code blocks in MVC? Code blocks in MVC are used to enclose C# statements. This is an example for code blocks. It starts with the symbol @ and encloses with curly braces. Code blocks work with loops and keywords in different ways. What are helpers in MVC, and list the types of helpers? Helpers in MVC are HTML classes that help to create HTML control programmatically. HTML helpers in MVC generate HTML and result as a string. Some of the different types of helper methods that ASP.NET provides are create links. Create links is to get the information from the routing tables. Create inputs. This helps to create text boxes and buttons. Create form. Handle post back to an action on a different controller. What are non-action methods? Non-action methods are attributes used when a public method in a controller does not want an action method. Here is an example that shows how to create a non-action method in MVC. What is model binding? Model binding in MVC allows mapping the HTTP request data with the models using the data sent by the browser in an HTTP request. Model binding also acts as a bridge between the HTTP request and C# action methods. Using model binding, it automatically transfers post and get into a specified data. Explain the process of validation in MVC. Validation in MVC is used to check the user input and provides a set of validation that is easy to use and powerful to check the errors of the user. What is a partial view? Partial view is a view that is rendered from the another view, which helps to break the larger view into smaller views. A partial view is also used to reduce the duplication of the common markup content across the markup files. What are logic layers? The logic layer defines and decides the information needed to solve the assigned problems. Logic layers in MVC are divided into three types: business layer, display layer, and input control layer. What are the drawbacks of MVC? There are many advantages and disadvantages of using MVC applications. You will now understand some of the disadvantages of using them. MVC is not suitable for large type applications. The complexity of the applications is high using MVC. It is difficult to understand the design pattern in MVC. Deployment of applications is hard compared to the other applications. What are file extensions for Razor View? Razor is a view engine used to write the mix of HTML and server-side. It is also a general-purpose template engine that does not provide any ties to the MVC, which allows the creation of view engine inside the application. Razor in MVC contains Razor Markup, C#, and HTML. File extensions of Razor View are divided into two types: .cs HTML used for C#, .vb HTML used for Visual Basic. What is an unobtrusive AJAX? It is a progressive enhancement that focuses on the delivery of the content. Ajax calls in unobtrusive Ajax which are made through built-in helpers to eliminate the need to add the blocks of code. What are get and post actions? Get in MVC is used to request the data from a specific resource. It is the most common HTTP method. Below is the syntax of get action. Post is used to send data to the server to create and update a resource. Below is the syntax of post action. Now let us look at intermediate level interview questions. What is a Razor? Razor is a view engine used to write the mix of HTML and server-side. It is also a general-purpose template engine that does not provide any ties to MVC, which allows creating a view engine inside the application. Below is the syntax. In C# it is .cs HTML. In Visual Basic it is .vb HTML. What is exceptional handling in MVC? Exceptional handling in MVC is used to execute the action methods using try and catch blocks. It is the process for responding to the exceptional condition for the special processing. For example, here in this program, you will create an exception for the application that shows an error on the web page that displays a custom error message or custom error pages. What is a layout view? Layout view in MVC allows creating a common site template that inherits multiple views to provide a consistent look for an application. The layout view has the same extension as the other views, which you can store in the shared folder. ASP.NET MVC layout allows the child views using some methods, like render section method and render body method. What are web APIs? Web API is a platform used to build RESTful applications using .NET frameworks that include small and large applications for devices, tablets, and mobile devices. Here is an example for web APIs. This is a basic program to add the configuration of web API in the configuration folder of the MVC application using the name web API config. What is form authentication in MVC? Form authentication in MVC is responsible for users' credentials like sign up, sign in, login, and logout. It also provides a way to handle authentication using custom logics in ASP.NET applications. You can do form authentication using the SQL database to provide the user credentials and information. It is used to edit the web configuration files and add a login page to authenticate. Explain Bootstrap and its use. Bootstrap is a front-end framework tool used for web applications to build a user interface using HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. It was first developed by Twitter developers for personal use and became popular with the designer and developers with flexibility. Bootstrap provides all pieces of layouts, menus, fonts, widgets, and other many features. You can find Bootstrap files in the Solution Explorer as bootstrap.css and bootstrap.js. What are glimpses in MVC? Glimpse in MVC is a free and open source Nugget platform used to perform operations like performance, debugging, and diagnosis for the applications. It allows users to find information about every action by the server, including the Azure test in the application. List the types of action results in MVC. Action result is an action method used along with an action. It is the result of action execution. The action result is a return type. Action results are divided in MVC into three categories: status result, content returning result, and redirection result. Status result provide the status of the code to the browser. Content returning result is responsible for returning the content, and redirection result redirects the specified URL. What is a request lifecycle? Request lifecycle is a sequence of events that occur when the application handles the HTTP request. Request lifecycle involves 5 steps: routing, MVC handler, controller, action invoker, and result execution. Routing is used to map the incoming URL to the router and creates request content and sends it to the next layer. MVC handler is responsible for creating the controller instance. Controller is used to deal with the request and implement the controller interface. Action invoker is used to execute the action method sent by the controller. Result execution is responsible for the execution of action method in the controller. Explain the ways of adding the constraints to a router. Constraints to a router in MVC are added in two ways: using the object that implements the router constraint interface or using the regular expressions. Explain routing in MVC. Routing is the process of mapping the browser request to the controller and responding back. Router handles the information and URL patterns in routing, and it stores all the configured files to the application in the routing tables. Routing in MVC is divided into two types: convention-based routing and attribute-based routing. This is an example of registering the routing with different custom routes using the name default. The default maps with the URL pattern in the routing table. What is output caching? Output caching is responsible for improving the performance of the application. It also enables you to remove unwanted actions. Below is the example for output caching. Mention the benefits of areas. Areas in MVC allow to organize the models, views, and controllers into a separate function in the application like billing, support, etc. Let's see some benefits of using areas in MVC. Using areas, it is easy to perform unit testing. It allows you to separate the functional sections of the applications. It also helps in communicating with the other areas by creating another area. What is a view start? View start is introduced by a view engine that applies to all views automatically. Below is an example for view start. What is attribute routing? Attribute routing is a type of routing that provides more control over the URL by defining routers directly on the actions and controller in the application. Some of the advantages of using attribute routing are: it reduces the chance of errors in the application. It is easy to map routes pointing to the same action. It provides more control over the URL. How to change the action names in MVC? The action name attribute is used to change the action name in MVC. Explain data annotations. Data annotations in MVC are responsible for providing the instance checking for the client side. MVC provides various data annotations. Some of them are: required is used to indicate the property of the required field. String length is used to indicate the string length. Bind is used to include or exclude the binding parameters. Email address is used to value the email address. What is the difference between MVC and web forms? MVC is based on a design pattern that helps to create the application faster. Web forms are based on functions and code behind. MVC provides HTML helpers to create the controls, whereas in web form, every control in web form has server control. MVC is used to create partial views, and web forms are used to create user controls. There is no view state in MVC. View state in web forms is used to maintain the state. It is easy to use jQuery, JavaScript, and CSS in MVC. Web forms use a little jQuery and JavaScript. Differentiate between view bag and view data. View bag is used to transfer the temporary data from the controller to a view. View data is used to transfer data from the controller to the view. View bag is a type of object, whereas view data is a key value collection. View bag is slower than view data, and view data is faster than view bag. View bag works only on .NET 4.0 and above. View data works on .NET 3.5 and above. View bag is used as dynamic, so no need for type conversion, whereas in view data, type conversion is required. Explain scaffolding in MVC. Scaffolding is a technique used as code generation for ASP.NET Web applications. It also generates code for CRUD operations using the Entity Framework models. It reduces the time and generates clean code while creating the application. It is automatically installed in Visual Studio 2013 and above versions. Explain the difference between temp data and view bag. Temp data is a key value collection, whereas view bag is a type of object. Temp data is used to pass data between two consecutive requests. View bag values becomes null. Temp data works during the current and subsequent request. View bag works only at the current time. Temp data works on .NET 3.5 and above. View bag works with .NET 4.0 and above. Explain the difference between render page and render body. Render page is a layout page that contains content filled by the other pages, whereas render body is a method of master page or Razor commonly used as a layout page. Render page is obviously present in the layout view. Render body doesn't have a fixed path. Render page does not include any parameters, but render body always includes the parameters like boolean. Multiple methods are not allowed in render page. Render body allows multiple methods. List a few rules of Razor syntax. Razor is a view engine used to create web applications by combining the features of MVC. There are certain rules to be followed for the Razor. They are: Razor block having C# are enclosed with curly braces. Variables are always declared with the var keyword. Variables and functions with inline always start with the symbol @. C# file has an extension of .cs_html. Code statements always end with semicolon. Now let us look at the advanced level interview questions. What are bundling and minification? Bundle is a logical group of physical files used to improve the performance of the application by providing the inbuilt features bundled into a single file, which improves the performance using HTTP request known as bundling. This program below shows all the bundles of CSS files present in the folder of bundling. Minification is a technique of removing the unnecessary comments and characters from CSS and JavaScript to reduce the size to improve the performance of the application. Below is the example of minification. It alerts if the number is even or if the number is odd. What is JSON binding? JSON binding is known as JavaScript object notation binding that supports MVC3 using JSON value provider factory. It allows action methods to accept and model bind data in JSON binding. This is a simple program that shows how to bind data using JSON binding. What is cross-domain AJAX? AJAX cross-domain sends a request to refresh the URL domain of the web pages. There are many ways to implement and use the cross-domain AJAX. The most commonly used cross-domain AJAX are send JSON pre-request and cross-domain resource sharing. Explain the usage of remote validation in MVC. Remote validation is the process of validating specific data posting to a server without posting the entire data to the server. This program on remote validation helps in checking the validation of the user using the parameter username and that displays the message name already exists. List the standard HTML helpers in MVC. Standard HTML helpers in MVC are used to render the HTML controls like label, text box, password, checkbox, etc. Some of the standard HTML helpers in MVC are HTML text box. It is used to create a text box. HTML password. This is used to create a text box with password identity. Next we have HTML checkbox. It is used to create the property in the checkbox. HTML radio button. It automatically displays the property in the radio button. Explain the implementation of AJAX in MVC. AJAX is asynchronous JavaScript and XML client-side script that communicates to the database without any need from the postback. It also speeds the response time in the application. Below is the syntax of AJAX in MVC. Explain about MVC model binders. Model binders in MVC allow mapping HTTP request with the model. It works when a user requests the data from the browser to the controller. At this time, model binding works on middleman to map the incoming request with the controller action method. Update model method function observes the request and updates the model class. This program is process of adding the controller with the index action method to the MVC. Explain areas in MVC. Areas in MVC allow organizing the model, view and controllers into a separate function in the application like billing, support, etc. It is mainly used for large applications. When the developer or user is working with the area, it is important to register with the areas. The syntax for registering the areas is as follows. In this, each MVC has its own area folder that allow it to keep controllers, models and views separately. Explain the roles of presentation, abstraction and control in MVC. Presentation, abstraction and control is an architectural pattern that separates MVC interactive system into three types of components. Presentation. Presentation in MVC is responsible for formats of the visual and audio presentation of the data. Abstraction is responsible for retrieving information and processing the data. Control handles the flow of control, the communication between two components. Explain the uses of keep and peek in MVC. Keep in MVC is used to preserve the data of temp data after the value is read. Peek in MVC is used to read the value in temp data without clearing the data. Here are some differences between keep and peek. Keep provides two overloading methods, whereas peek provides no overloading method. Once the data is read by the keep, then the data is erased. The data in peek remains the same after the operation is successful. In keep, redirect to result and redirect to route result are called to get the items back. In peek, there is no action called by the peek internally to retrieve.
So here we wrap up the ASP.NET full course for 2023. If you have any questions, please add it in the comment section below and our experts will get back to you as early as possible. Do subscribe to Simplilearn for more such amazing content. Until then, stay safe and keep learning.
Hi there, if you like this video, subscribe to the Simplilearn YouTube channel and click here to watch similar videos. To nerd up and get certified, click here.